Hello there. This video is going to be a demonstration on how to set up and calibrate the moosapotamus ADA flanger clone circuit. And so let's dive right in. The first thing I'm going to do, as with any circuit, is just verify the power supply. I've got my multimeter set to DC voltage. I'm using a 9-volt wall wart to power the circuit board, and so I'm going to check the input power right here. And it looks like my wall wart is putting out about 9.7 volts. That goes through the charge pump circuit, which should step that up to about 18 volts and this point right here, and about 17.9. That's good. That goes through a diode here and over to the voltage regulator. So on the input pin we're seeing 17.6, so we get about a 0.3 voltage drop going through the diode. This is what's coming into the voltage regulator. Now we'll check the output pin on the voltage regulator, and 15 volts coming out of the voltage regulator, going out to the rest of the circuit board, which is exactly what we're looking for. Take the time yourself to go through and check the power supply pins on each of the integrated circuits as well, just to verify that you're getting good power distribution. And then also check this point in the upper left corner labeled VB. That's the bias voltage. About 7 volts is good. Okay, so the power supply checks out, and we're ready to get started making adjustments to some of the trim pots on the circuit board. We're going to start by setting the minimum and the maximum clock frequencies, which means we'll be making adjustments to T4 and T5. For the initial setup, we want all the trim pots set to 50%. We want to have the enhance, speed, and range controls set to 0%, and the threshold and the manual control set to 100%. Okay. Now to set the clock frequencies, we need a frequency counter. So I have that function on my multimeter. I'm going to change that over to the Hertz setting for the frequency counter. I'm going to keep my common lead attached to ground, and I'm going to attach the positive lead to the test point on the circuit board right here. Okay, and so now my meter is displaying frequency, and these are the numbers that we're looking for. We want to have a maximum of 2.6 megahertz and a minimum of 69.6 kilohertz. And we check those by turning the manual pot. With the range set to 0, when we turn the manual pot full up, the meter will display the maximum frequency point. Okay, and you can see that's off. We need to make some adjustments. We want that to be 2.6. And then when we turn the manual pot down to 0, we want that to read 69.6 kilohertz. Again, we need to make some adjustments. So I'm going to turn the manual back to 100%, and we're going to start working with T4 and T5. A quick word about what they are and what they do. T5 is the clock range trim. Adjusting this trim pot essentially does the same thing as the range control on the panel range control. Okay, it changes the range of the sweep from maximum to minimum, makes it wider or shorter. Okay, T4 is called the max clock trim. And with a name like that, it sounds like you use that trim to set what the maximum is. But when you make that adjustment, it actually moves the whole range up and down. So in reality, my impression of what T4 does is that it's really doing the same thing as the manual panel control does. Okay, now to get these frequencies set up is going to be a bit of an iterative process. We're going to have to make some adjustments, check the high frequency, turn it down, check the low frequency, make some adjustments, and we're going to start with the high. We've got the manual set at 100%, so I'm going to turn T4 up. Okay, now that's going to move whatever the range is, it's just going to move everything up. And I'm going to turn it up, and we can see the meter's responding. I'm going to overshoot the 2.6 a bit because I know I'm going to have to change the range as well. Okay, I'm going to go to about there, and I'm going to turn the manual down to 0 and see how far up that brought the minimum frequency. Okay, 64.4 kilohertz. We want that to be 69.6. So I'm going to turn T5, which is the range, and now what that's going to do is shift the whole, it's going to make the range wider or narrower. So by adjusting that to bring the minimum up, it's also going to bring the maximum down. Again, so that's why I set the maximum higher than it was, because now my next adjustment is going to bring them a little closer together. Okay, so decreasing the range, turning T5 clockwise, is going to increase the minimum frequency. Does that make sense? This is my range, and I decrease the range, the minimum frequency goes up. So I'm turning T5 clockwise. To right there, 69.6. Okay, let's turn the manual back up to 100% and see what that did to the maximum frequency. Okay, that's a little high. Now the minimum is okay, but the maximum is high. Okay, so what we need to do is move it down, but shrink the range so that we don't move the low frequency, the minimum frequency, down too much. Okay, so I'm going to adjust T4 just a little bit to decrease, and I'm turning T4 clockwise to decrease the range. And then T5, I'm going to decrease that a little bit as well. Okay, now we'll turn the manual down to 0% and see what happened to the minimum frequency. Okay, that's a little bit low. Again, so we want to bring the minimum up, but not so much that the high point gets too high. So I'm going to take T4, I'm going to increase that a teeny bit. Okay, and then I'm going to turn T5 down clockwise to decrease the range further to bring this minimum frequency the rest of the way up to 69.6. Okay, turning the manual back to 100%. Let's check out the maximum frequency point again and see where that is. That's looking pretty good. Okay, we could tweak that a little bit, but I'm going to leave it where it is. I think you get the idea. It's basically an iterative process. Okay, turning T4 counterclockwise increases it's like increasing the manual control. It makes the range move up. And turning T4 clockwise moves the range down. So counterclockwise moves the range up for T4. Counterclockwise moves the range up. Clockwise on T4 moves the range down. On T5, counterclockwise increases the range, and clockwise decreases the range. Okay, so you just need to go back and forth between those two a little bit. So we're all set there. We've got the minimum and the maximum frequencies set. We're going to put some sound through here now and hear how it sounds.